Well, good morning, social media breakfast. Hello, it is a little dark outside, unfortunately, this morning, but we're so glad that you're here with us today. It is Wednesday, October 21st. Let's get into it because we've got a packed morning for you. If you don't know who we are, if you're joining us for the first time, we are all about education and networking. We meet on the third Wednesday morning of each month, virtually for the time being or for a while at least. So we're so glad that you're here. And if you're watching us now, you know how this goes. So you can join us again next month. You should connect with us if you aren't already on all of the socials. We are a social media breakfast, so we are all the places. It's just SMB Mad, and you can join in the conversation this morning at hashtag SMB Mad. We would love to have you. Also, please feel free. I know that there's not a lot happening right now in the world in terms of conferences, but if there are educational opportunities that you would like to be a part of to help further your own career or also your own professional development, please feel free to apply for a scholarship on our website, smbmad.org/scholarships. We'd love to help you make that happen. Please, again, this is sort of an interesting one to talk about, but we always are looking for people to help get involved. I say interesting to talk about because right now, again, here we are online, but we would still love to have you part of what we're doing. We're always looking for more speakers for nonprofit spotlights. We're looking for people to help us make this happen. So please, if you'd like to volunteer, you can find out how you can do so on our website, smbmad.org. Also, please join our Facebook group. This is probably one of our favorite things that we do. It's a great opportunity to get connected with other people in our industry, ask questions. Just search for Social Media Madison Masterminds and you'll find it. And if you request to join, we will gladly accept you into our fold. And we have a lot of cool things in that group that you definitely want to check out. November is nonprofit month. So just looking ahead to next month, we are excited about our event next month. It's called The Art of Connecting with Your Digital Donor. So we would love for you to make sure to put that on your calendar. It's a great tie-in with nonprofit month. So we're really excited about that one. And we hope that you'll join us for that. We want to say, excuse me, thank you to our sponsors this morning. We could not do what we do without them. Social Media Breakfast is a free event. It always has been. And we're so grateful to our sponsors for allowing us to keep it that way, as well as our partner creators who without, we couldn't do this. And certainly not this virtual thing without them. So thank you so much to all of them for helping make that happen. I want to go ahead and turn it over to one of our sponsors. I want to say hey to my friend Andy from Dream Bank. Hey, Andy, good morning.
Hey, David. So excited to be here. Yes. Thank you all for tuning in today. My name is Andy Frisky. As David said, I am a senior dream curator at Dream Bank, and just want to give a little snippet of what Dream Bank is for those of you who aren't familiar. So Dream Bank is a free community resource that is located in the heart of Madison, Wisconsin. The whole reason we're put on by American Family Insurance, the whole reason why we exist is to help inspire people to pursue their dreams. And in large part, that's done through the programs that we offer. So when we're not under a pandemic or working from home, we typically host right around 40 free events a month in our space with 8 different event series. A couple things that I want to highlight though in particular, we just wrapped up our 2nd annual Dream Summit, which was virtual this year. And you can actually go and view all of that wonderful content through the rest of this month if you head to our website, which is amfam.com/making-difference/Dream Bank. But once you get there, there's a good concise list of all of our events that we have. You can go ahead and register for the Dream Summit, but also you can go ahead and register for this awesome event that we have coming up this Thursday. American Families Insurance current CEO, Jack Salzweedl, will be sitting down with executive chairman of the Walt Disney Company, Bob Iger, and having kind of a fireside chat. That's at 3 p.m. Thursday, October 22nd. It's going to be a great event. We hope to see you there. I will kick it back to David.
Thanks so much, Andy, and thank you, Dream Bank, for just being a wonderful supporter of Social Media Breakfast. So, and now I want to pass it over to my friend Elise from Powder Keg. Good morning, Elise.
Hey, David, good morning. And hi, everyone out there watching from home. My name is Elise, and I work with the fully in-house team over at Powderkeg Web Design. And by our name, you probably can assume we are a fully custom web design and development company located just down the road in Verona. But, clearly we're all also working from home right now. And I wanted to let everyone know that we're doing a really big push on sharing website accessibility resources this month. And so this week we'll actually be sharing like a checklist that our design team made that you can use to audit your own website to see how accessible it is. So that's going to be a really cool resource. I'll be sharing that out on LinkedIn to keep everyone posted on when you can access that. So be sure to connect with me. Just look me up, Elise Chan, Chan. And we'll also be hosting a website accessibility webinar next week. So you can always stay up to date on our latest resources and events over on our website as well, which is powderkegwebdesign.com/PKU. So that's specifically our resource library. So hopefully everyone can check that out. We're really passionate about website accessibility and sharing all those awesome digital marketing resources. So check that out, and I hope everyone enjoys today's panel.
Thank you so much, Elise. We really appreciate that. And last but certainly not least, I'm going to pass it to my fellow board member, Hannah, who's going to introduce our nonprofit spotlight for this month. Good morning, Hannah.
Good morning. So we love to share event info from our nonprofit attendees. If you are attending the event today and you work for a nonprofit, definitely apply for a nonprofit spotlight. We're currently accepting applications for 2021. So you can visit smbmad.org to fill out the short application. Our nonprofit spotlight for this month is the Madison Public Library Foundation. The foundation emphasizes equity and access and funds many projects that reach and benefit people of color and underrepresented populations. They build better libraries by raising funds for enrichment programs and giving vital resources to the community. Today I'm going to talk about two of the events they have going on currently. So their Ex Libri 2020 fundraiser is not in person this year because of COVID. It was converted to a box set theme. So the boxes are filled with local beverages and other snacks and surprises. Those sold out quickly, but the virtual fundraiser also includes a silent auction of items and experiences that are donated by local businesses. So you can access that auction beginning November 2nd at mplfoundation.org. The second event I'm going to tell you about is the Wisconsin Book Festival, also fully online this year. But all author programs are free and they're live streamed by a crowdcast. There are about a dozen events that are left for this year and more to come in the spring. They are all recorded, so you can watch one if you miss it, and you can check those out at wisconsinbookfestival.org. I'll turn it back to David.
Thank you so much, Hannah. I really appreciate that. So we've got all of our announcements done for this morning, so we're going to actually just jump right into it. I'm really, really excited about this morning, and fully recognize that I'm biased, but I'm really excited about this panel today. We've been working hard, and I want to introduce our panelists this morning before we get into it. I want to start, I don't know what order you're all seeing them in on your screen, so I'll start with the order that I'm seeing them in. I want to start by introducing Erin Ogden. Good morning, Erin. And then we have Addie and AJ together this morning, who you might be familiar with because they are the ones who take our amazing social media breakfast photos, and they are still doing so this morning while being panelists, so they're multitasking today. Steph Shanks, good morning. And then Maison Engel. Good morning. All right. Well, first of all, before we get started, I do want to say we were talking about this beforehand. With the exception of maybe Erin and myself, this panel is made up of photographers who are primarily behind the scenes, and a lot of them would say that there's a reason for that. So please, this morning, they know that some of these individuals are doing this thing very much outside of their comfort zone. And I don't mean to call attention to that in a negative way, because they're going to be awesome. But this is not the thing that they normally do. They normally are behind the camera taking photos. And so this morning they're here talking to you and sharing resources and insights with you. So it's very exciting, but very outside of their wheelhouse. So, but I want to just jump right into it because we have a lot we want to talk about this morning. And I'm going to kind of help keep the conversation moving as we go, but everybody's going to kind of jump in at various points. Please feel free, if I haven't said so already, to drop comments on social media. If you have any comments or questions for the group, we will address those all at the end. So first of all, I think, now that we've got introductions out of the way, I think, as us as a group have been talking about this, one of the things that we sort of have started with, or we feel like is a good starting point in terms of conversation around this topic, is talking about the intent behind photos and why are we doing this. So I wonder if we can kind of like touch on like what is the intent with photos and as a starting point for this topic this morning.
Sure, I'd like to start with that. Intent is really the base of a great photo. It kind of sets us apart from, just snapping a picture because, oh, I didn't post today. So when you're thinking about images, really kind of put some heart and soul into the photos and some time into the photos. When we're scrolling through Facebook, there's so much random stuff. We're exposed to so much advertising, especially now. It seems like everything is ads. So, and frankly, I'm kind of over it. So I'm sure your customers are over it too. So by just simply taking the time to ask questions like, what purpose does this photo serve? Is it relatable to the platform that you're putting it on? And is it relevant to your clients and their needs and their pain points? Those are three really great questions that I would really invite you guys to start asking.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know if you can see the.
Yeah, Nick, we have a slide. There we go.
Yeah, so this is pretty basic, but it's just, it's wood. It's, at the end of the day, it's a piece of wood, but how you decide to photograph that and display it to your customer can really make the difference.
Yeah, I love that example, Steph. If you look at that slide there, it's the same sort of element that we're looking at, but dependent upon who your audience is how you would maybe frame that photo or take that photo. So Nick, if you could throw that up again, just really quick. I think that's just really a great sort of visual to sort of drive that point home that Steph's trying to make. And I think too, as we think about, knowing your audience and knowing the intent behind your photos, it does really then sort of kind of naturally invite the question of, when do we need to maybe start worrying about getting permissions? I know this is a question that comes up a lot, and we've had this question asked a lot, which is part of the reason why we put this panel together. And I think I was remiss in pointing out, I'll let her do this, but Erin is not a photographer. I assumed that all of you knew that, but I actually did not make that clear. So I'll let Erin give a little intro to herself and what she does. But Erin, if you could kind of maybe touch on, Steph was able to sort of tell us a little bit about thinking about why we take photos, but could you tell us a little bit about, when do we need to start worrying about getting permission to take people's photos or even to post them on social? And then just kind of tell a little bit about who you are too, because I sort of glossed over that.
No worries at all. So I'm Erin. I'm an attorney. If you've been going to social media breakfast for a while, you might actually remember I spoke probably about 3 years ago now about copyright and using copyright on the internet. And so with that, first of all, I want to say, while I'm talking, our social media manager, Lola, the dog, might choose to join in. So she always has very important things to talk about, like squirrels and other dogs in front of our house. So apologize for that. But yeah, so when I hear about like, what's your intent? One reason why I love people taking their own photos is, you own them, right? So copyright law is the protection of the creative expression of ideas. And so as a photographer, when you take a photo, you are the owner of that particular photo, that creative expression. And so if you are taking the photo and using it, you don't have to worry about permission unless you say, can I use this? Yes, I can. If you're taking somebody else's expression, someone else's skill and talent, then you need to get their permission to do so. Now, for those of you who naturally can take a good photo, you're like, what are you talking about? It's not hard. Well, from someone who cannot take a good photo to save their soul, it's hard, right? Like I take a photo and it's going to be somehow blurred or missing tops of heads or just blah.
Aaron, have I got the panel for you?
Right?
I
think we're going to be able to help you with that this morning.
Right? I'm going to listen to this panel more than anything. So
that's right.
So I see the value in their thing, because if I try and take a photo, it's like, well, that's a thing. But
right.
when one of these
Absolutely.
photo, right, it's like, wow, that actually makes me want to buy the thing, and that has value. And so if you are not getting permission or not paying through things like stock or anything, that you're taking away the value that these people are bringing. And so one of the nice things is if you're taking the photos or having someone you know that has permission, that gives you permission to take those photos, then we're not worrying about getting a cease and desist later.
Right. But can you also just sort of touch on, in terms of I think a lot of us are in a position where, we might be taking other people's photos, right? So like we may be maybe not so much now, but in the future at an event, or you may be, at volunteering or something, and there are other people in the photos. How do you navigate that? I mean, what do we have to ask people's permission to take their photo and then to use it? How do we deal with that? And again, we're talking about us as small business owners specifically, maybe, or people who are marketing managers for a company, not necessarily a photographer's perspective, right?
Right. So first thing to do is think about it before it happens, not after. It's easier to let people know, hey, when you come to this event, your photo is going to be taken.
Yeah. Yep.
And let people know that, so they can and then give an opportunity to know how they can opt out, either opt out by not going, or know that if they see a photographer, say, hey, nope, not me. Because sometimes you have events that might be a thing that people don't want to have their photos. So setting up ahead of time, so people have expectations, is really important. Letting the photographer know what those rules are.
Right.
Maybe
well,
you
and I think
during the crowd, but not during presentations.
Absolutely. And I think too, you had made a good point, and we talked about this prior to, what's the harm in asking, right? I mean, there's no, if you ask permission to take someone's photo, what's the harm, right? I mean, you'd rather be safe than sorry, right?
Right. And I'd rather the event organizer do that instead of putting that onus on the photographer to have to go around every time and ask. Sometimes as photographers, you might want to do that and be like, because then often people are like, oh yeah, and they put on their smiley face. Right. But don't make it their job to do it. Sometimes say, photography is going to happen in this. And make sure it's a public event. If it's a private event that you're doing and taking photos, then you're going to want to get more specific permission.
Sure.
Because people have a belief of privacy if it's private, right? And so just think of yourself, if you were in somewhere and you thought it was a private thing and all of a sudden your picture was all over the place, you'd be like, what happened here?
Absolutely.
So be aware of your surroundings and what you're doing. Because I know if I took a picture of my dad and posted it on Facebook, he would be less than thrilled.
Right. Yeah. Mason, you were going to say
something?
I
was just going to say, from a photographer standpoint, when we're hired to shoot an event, let's say, we're assuming that it's okay for us to take the photos. Like that's what we're getting hired for, that we don't have to ask people's permission. So I definitely would say good communication between event organizer and photographer would be important, but that's most likely the assumption on our end. So.
Right. And I think too, another thing is just a point that I want to make before we move on to kind of the next piece of this is, knowing what you have permission for and what you don't, right? I mean, I think, asking, hey, can I take your photo is one thing. But hey, can I take your photo and post it to my social media is another thing. Can I take your photo and put it in print is I mean, these are these are very different things. It's not just, can I take your photo and then that covers everything, right? I mean, you do need to be very specific with what you're asking, and then also what you're, I mean, you know, hey, we're taking photos at this event that are going to be used on our social media. Make it very clear, right? What people are essentially, the possibility that might happen, and that people have the opportunity to opt out, but you have to really make it super clear, you know, what that looks like, because just yes isn't always just enough, right? You need to make it clear. So anything else on that, Aaron, that you want to touch on before we move forward?
I think your point was great about making it clear that you're taking it, and then that these are going to be posted and where it's going to be posted.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I think we might talk about this later about platform.
Yep.
But just giving some highlights.
Yeah, for sure. So okay, so we kind of talked about intent. We talked about, you know, sort of the basics of getting permission, right? But I also want to talk about a little bit about now taking the photo, right? And again, we are talking to you. You are the people who are on the front lines, and we're assuming that you are not a photographer, right? So we're talking to you as if you were not a photographer from the perspective of experts. So let's talk about how to take a good photo, and specifically like how you light a good photo, right? Like, what are some tips that we have for that?
Yeah, I can definitely jump in on this one.
Yeah.
Aaron, hopefully this will be helpful for you. So yeah, lighting, composition, how to take a good photo. This is clearly a huge topic to talk about. Right. So I feel like I'm just going to give a couple tips that hopefully people can use right away as they're trying to take their own photos for their businesses. So to start, lighting, plain and simple, it's number one when it comes to photography. And I'm going to show an example of this, a real live example. So if I come stand by my window for natural light, how do I look now compared to now? When I'm taking a photo of myself indoors or taking a video for my Instagram story indoors, yes, I want to be by a window for natural light, but I don't want the window behind me. I want to be facing the window so that natural light is illuminating my face. I think we can all agree that this looks much better than with the window behind me, as I showed first. So it's my first tip for doing a photo of yourself or a video of yourself indoors. However, many of you probably also want to take photos of an item or your product indoors as well to post on your social media channels. Same idea for this. You're going to want to take a photo. You're going to want to take those photos by a window as well. In my examples here that you can see, this was a magazine article that my business was featured in that I wanted to share on Instagram. The photo on the left, this was taken right next to a window, whereas the photo on the right, this one was taken in a room with no windows where the main lighting source was overhead lighting. As you can see in the photo on the right, because of the overhead lighting, there's some glare on the magazine page, which makes the images hard to see, which makes the text hard to read. There's also some distracting like shadows from my hand, and in the bottom right of the image, my phone taking that picture. And so I think we could probably all agree that the image on the left, it's just a lot cleaner, a lot easier to read. And I will say that, you know, both these images, I didn't edit them at all. These are just straight out of camera because I just wanted to show the power of like simply lighting. So you're going to want to find a spot, like I said, by a window to shoot your product or your item. Once you find a good spot in your home that you really like the lighting, it's going to be good to always shoot in that same spot so that in all your images, the lighting is really consistent. Consistency is key for photography and for your brand to look really cohesive. So now you have this great spot. You want to shoot all your photos there, but you don't obviously want it to look like you took every photo in the exact same spot on your Instagram, you know.
Right.
So just a quick tip or idea that you could do is you can just change out the backdrops underneath your products to make it look like you have a lot more spots. So, yep, this is a behind the scenes of that magazine. Again, if you look at the photo on the right, there's where I took it right next to my window, or the photo on the left, and the photo on the right is where I took it in that room with no windows. So as you can see, I use just like a neutral styling mat, it's called, to put underneath of the magazine as just a clean backdrop. You can buy these online. They can be kind of expensive. But a good option, you know, you could get one or two. Other cheaper options that you could use would be like tag board. wrapping paper, fabric, things like that. So again,
what about like an Amazon box, like the clean side of an Amazon box? I mean, that could work, right?
Exactly. Wood, like a piece of wood, just any different backdrop, so that you're always using the same spot with the same lighting, but just swapping out that backdrop underneath to make it look like you have a bunch of different spots.
Sure.
So those are some tips for shooting yourself or your products indoors. Another option, obviously, is to take your photos outside. So for my personal style, for my business, I prefer to take outdoor photos in the shade, if at all possible, because I like nice, clean, even light. Looking at, these next photos that I took of myself here, outside, the photo on the left, I took in the direct sun. So the sun was out in front of me here, I was facing it, and yes, it's very bright and I guess you could say well lit, but you can also see that I'm squinting because I literally can't open my eyes. And bright light like this, it's really harsh and unforgiving. Like, it shows every blemish, every wrinkle. Honestly, you guys, if you zoom in on this photo, you can literally see my chin hairs, like, not kidding. So I prefer to, go a few feet to the left in my yard and take the photo in the shade. The photo on the right was taken in the shade. Obviously, I can open my eyes a lot more. My skin is a lot more smooth. I think if I'm posting a photo of myself, I would want the one on the right, because you just are looking at my face, my smile. It's
right.
It's a lot nicer.
And I think that's a misconception, like, I think people think, look for the light, right? Like, the photo needs to be well lit, but I think you make a really, the examples don't lie, right?
Right. They definitely don't lie. So just something to think about. And again, here it's the same idea, consistency, it's important. So again, I said I like to take photos in the shade. So I'm always going to take photos outdoors. I'm going to find shade, or I'm going to take it on a cloudy day. Maybe your style's different, but just keep it consistent. Mm-hmm. The last thing I want to touch on really quick is negative space. So I have one more picture to show here pulled up. This is a screenshot of an Instagram account that I like to follow called Social Squares. It's maybe a little hard to see, but if you look at this screenshot, it's really nice to look. There we go. Awesome. Thank you. It's really pleasing to look at. And that, in my opinion, is because of the negative space that she incorporates in her feed. So negative space is any blank or empty space in a photo. So let's say that top row, the middle image, that second row with the text, the left image, the row down, the far right image, those all have nice blank space around whatever she's trying to feature. This just creates breathing room in the image, and it makes things just look really pleasant, not so chaotic and cluttered in the feed. So this is something to think about when you're taking photos of your products. Sometimes you want to close up, and sometimes you want to pull back and create some nice negative space when you're putting all your images together in, for example, your Instagram feed. For sure. So a practical tip I have for you really quick about this is you pull out your phone, or you can come back to this later, and it's pretty simple to find, but I have an iPhone. I'm sure this works for any phone, but if you, you're gonna wanna turn on your grid lines, it's called, on your phone. So this is under settings. I would scroll down to find my camera. And then under composition, it just says grid. I can turn that on or off on my phone. If I turn it on, and then I open up my camera, I now have these grid lines on my camera when I'm taking photos. This is super helpful to not only know, okay, as I'm taking a photo of my product, is it straight? Mm-hmm. But it also helps with composition. So I would recommend either placing the item you're taking a photo of right in the middle, that middle box there, or you can place it on one of the grid lines. So the right or left grid line, the top or the bottom grid line. Placing on the grid lines, this just helps with composition. It helps to create negative space like we just talked about. And it's also really helpful if you're taking a photo of multiple products, you can place them on the grid lines. So, right.
No, that's super helpful. And I think especially considering, I think we know probably a lot of people are taking photos with their phones. It's great to know that there are some really practical things that we can do with our phones, which is a really great segue into, I know Steph has some really, some good tips and things in terms of some low cost resources that you can use that can help your photos look and feel better, right?
Yep. Yeah. I have some stuff actually sitting here, a little hands-on demonstration. So the first thing I wanted to show you guys, especially because we were just talking about light, This is a selfie light, and it actually just fits right onto your phone. So it's really great if you're trying to take pictures of product and you don't have light, and you're trying to use your phone to take photos. Let me see if I can get it on right. So it kind of goes something like this, right over the lens of your phone. And again, you can see it brightens. So that's a pretty easy, this thing is like $4 or $5. It was funny before we started this thing, we were talking about what do creatives do now that when we're in quarantine, because everybody became creative, what do creatives do? Do they get more creative? And I look up shit on the internet. Oh, stuff on the internet.
Right. It's fine.
That's what I do. I look up fun stuff for fun.
Yeah.
So another thing, which this is actually kind of a broken one, but a tripod is super awesome. A tripod's really great for behind the scenes photos when you want to take photos of yourself doing something. You can set your timer for 3 seconds, 5 seconds, 10 seconds on your phone and use your tripod. So again, even with that grid that we were just talking about, you can set up the photo exactly where you know you want to stand. You know, you can set that grid up
and those little tripods are relatively inexpensive as well. I mean, just to
cheap. Yeah. And there's all kinds of different tripods to use. That one is like handheld. I actually have a light on me right now, and that's got a bigger tripod.
Of course,
So yeah, there's plenty of stuff out there. So that's for photos. Real quick for video, I always like to have a microphone. This one was like $20 and it looks a little chaotic, but it works. It's super long. You know, for great audio, that's super important. And the other thing for video was a gimbal. And I do have a slide so people can kind of look at this stuff. A gimbal is really great for video as well. And again, this one doesn't have the tripod, but it comes with a tripod. So you can do photos and video with this as well. I think the key thing is to make sure your images are stable and well lit. And anything you can do to make that happen is super important.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially too, I think right now, you know, a lot of us are, you know, I mean, if we think about it in terms of where we are today, you know, a lot of us are doing stuff like literally, you know, on our own. And so, you know, having a little tripod like that, you know, we don't have someone maybe to hold the camera, right? So it's like, you know, those are really great low cost sort of things that we can use if we're shooting ourselves or some behind the scenes stuff or whatever. But I think, you know, it is a really great, you know, we've kind of touched on a lot of ways that we can do things ourselves, right? I think that there is a bigger conversation to be had about when is the time to bring somebody in. And I do think, you know, I know Addie and AJ are going to kind of touch on this. I also wanted to say, I should have said this in the beginning. If you've been watching in the grid, like AJ, like constantly like fidgeting and getting up and things, I didn't address it and I should have. He's not like, he's like setting up photos and stuff. Like, so he's not just like disinterested or, you know, just like maybe he is super fidgety. I don't know. But I should have addressed it up front that he's, you know, again, multitasking, taking photos. But so let's talk about when is the time to bring in a professional, right? You know, there are a lot of things that we can do, but there's only so much we can do on our own. So would you guys like to touch on that a little bit?
Yeah. We'd love to jump in. When is the right time to hire a professional photographer? What do you think, AJ?
Sappy joke, 11:45 on a Tuesday.
Yeah, that's one way to look at it. You know, Steph and Mason both really touched on photo intent. You know, that comes to mind, and budget. But I guess, you know that when you're hiring a professional photographer, you're hiring them for their creativity and to also help make your creative vision happen. And you're hiring them for their experience and just really for their knowledge for the art of photography, right?
Yeah. And as we've kind of talked about already a little bit, if you've exhausted some of your in-house and your own resources in photography, watched a ton of YouTube videos like we all do, and just can't figure out or capture that shot that you want for you and your brand, it might be time to hire a professional.
Right. And then, back to budget, budgets are tight for everybody, and you might only have, the ability to hire a photographer once a year, if that. So you want to make sure you're really prioritizing and itemizing what you need out of these photos. So, it's about having those upfront conversations with a photographer about, do they offer an hourly, half day, full day rate? What do they include in those sessions? Have those upfront conversations. And, when you're in that quoting process, you really want to make sure you have those conversations so you're not really underbidding or overbidding, getting those underbids and overbids from a photographer.
Exactly. It's super important to be clear on your vision to the photographer, what you want to accomplish. If you can send some creative inspiration photos to the photographer, that's super helpful. You can see the style, what you're looking for in your brand, what you're looking for in a shoot. Also, if you can make an outline of the shoot, you can, draw up the type of crops you want. That helps with the photographer, or helps the photographer, sorry. A shot list is also what that's called. That kind of just opens up the day of the shoot, a photographer and you being able to have more room for creativity, because you're not just throwing things out to the photographer randomly. Also, make sure the day of the shoot, everyone else if there's anyone in your company that needs to know the timeline, headshots, stuff like that, you don't want people to be missing, because that's just going to add to the time that day, or if the photographer has to come back, which just adds to the budget.
Yep.
For sure.
And back to budget, I'm sure a lot of you watching are in that nonprofit world, in that nonprofit space. Don't be afraid to ask the photographer, do they offer a nonprofit rate? A lot of us do. It does not hurt to ask. That's a lot of you are in that nonprofit space. Budgets are tight. Don't be afraid to talk in the process.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too, one thing I want to really bring to the forefront that I think is, if you only have X amount of dollars to do this in a year or in a quarter or whatever, a really great idea, is to actually essentially set up, like you're saying, sort of set up your own shoot, right? Say, okay, so I have them for this amount of time on this day. I want to do headshots. I want to get my team. I want to do some product shot. I want to do, take some photos of our workspace. I want, X, Y, Z, but just do it all in one fell swoop, right? Like do it all at once, rather than oh man, I need to get somebody to come in and do this, and then somebody to come in and do, but think about it in terms of content that you can do all at once, right? And take some planning on your part, but you could probably really maximize your budget and your time if you do a little bit of planning, right?
Exactly. That's where a timeline is crucial. For the day, you can get a lot done and be, very effective in a 4-hour period. Yeah.
Well, and we were talking about this, you really want to communicate that vision to the photographer, because yes, we can take on that creative piece and really tell your story visually, but we're not mind readers, right? We want to know how to tell, we want to, represent your brand the way you want it represented. So having those conversations ahead of time. So again, streamline getting everything done in that time frame.
Right. Yeah, Mason.
Jump in.
Oh, sorry.
Second and say the talking ahead of time can be so important, because remember, if you remember earlier when I said the person who takes it owns the rights. So you need to talk ahead of time. Are they going to own, as the photographer, going to own those rights, or do you as a company want to? Do you want to give them a portfolio license so they can use that shoot to show their work, or do you not want that? And so it's really important to have that stuff figured out ahead of time. And then also a pet peeve of mine that I want to make sure I say at least 5 times during this is, if you're hiring a professional, you're hiring a professional. That doesn't mean, oh, can I use your services for free and I promise to give you lots of Instagram likes.
Right. Absolutely.
That is not hiring a professor. That's saying, I don't think that you have any value. And so I told all the photographers, I'm going to push this because they don't want to do this. You don't do that to them.
Yeah.
They are a small business. They're trying to earn money to. Their skills are valuable. So don't tell them, oh, but I'll just give you lots of Instagram likes. That's just wrong. So don't do it. That's my pet peeve.
Mason, I know we're going to jump
into.
Yeah,
I was just going to touch in with an extra idea about Addie and AJ's topic with, maximizing your time and planning ahead of time. Just some practical examples of this, thinking of what it's called like evergreen content that you can keep using over and over again on your Instagram, Facebook, websites, things like that. So maybe you have an hour shoot. Let's just say you're going to shoot some photos of you to start. Then you're going to go do an outfit change while your photographer shoots a bunch of different products on a bunch of different backgrounds like we talked about. So you have professional images, but a bunch of options to be able to pull from later. Then you come back in with a different outfit, do some quick photos of you in a different outfit so it looks like a different day, do some photos with your hand on the product, things like that. You can get a bunch of different really versatile images in a short amount of time as long as you plan ahead of time and talk with your photographer about that. So evergreen content, I think, is really key.
Yeah, for sure. I know, Addie, you had a couple more things you were going to add on as well. I mean, in terms of that realm, I think one thing, again, just the idea of there does have to probably have some planning happening here, but I think it's good to think about these kinds of things. I think our mind, when we think about hiring a photographer, immediately goes to like, oh, coming to an event or, taking, headshot. Those are some easy ones, right? But thinking a little more broadly, I think is helpful too, right?
Exactly. I think this year it's all about like the ability to pivot, right? This is a crazy year, pivoting. So, it makes me think, David, you had reached out to us a while back saying, we're looking for some SMB branded photos, but we don't really want them to scream event.
Right.
I think, having those conversations with photographers, we can help kind of solve those issues with, through visual photos. And I guess two ways you can kind of think about it to help you are like, think about platform, right? Like, how are you going to use we talk about photo intention, then intention on the platform. Are you going to use these for Instagram stories? Because you're going to need a different ratio for the photos, right? So you're going to need vertical photos, or is this for LinkedIn? Know the ratios, but then also know the tone for those platforms. So what kind of, yes, you have these evergreen photos, but what is the tone for the specific platform, right?
Right.
And another way to think about it, and we touched on it, is behind the scenes, right? Like AJ's doing behind the scenes right now. Behind the scenes photos are huge. That is another great sort of evergreen topic that you can talk about. I'm sure a lot of you have like a really interesting thing with your organization or your business. Oh my God, I didn't know that the audience might be interested in knowing from point A to point B, this is how we get this done. And, in this world where everybody is captive on their screen, right? And we want to be in those moments with people. And a great way to do that is through behind the scenes photography and storytelling. So think about that. You're thinking about
and a lot of times behind the scenes stuff can be very evergreen. I mean, if you tell your photographer that's what you're looking for too, right? And I think you can, that's content that you can really stretch, right? You can use that this month, you can theoretically use that next month. Again, you kind of have to think ahead on those sorts of things, but that's where you can really maximize the value of hiring someone, is if you think ahead of like, hey, I'm going to need stuff to use on social for the next, couple months. What can I work with a photographer to get some really great content in this shoot, and then I don't need to spend a lot of money again for a little bit, maybe, and you really can, again, maximize that. So I know we've sort of talked about this, off and on here, but just in terms of expectations for this process, is there anything else that we want to kind of add to, just making sure the expectations are clear?
Yeah, I can talk about this. I think. Yeah. I know Aaron will be happy that I'm talking about it again. So laying out expectations in life, it's really important to know our own expectations, other people's expectations, etc. So before you're meeting with your photographer, I would say get really clear with yourself about what you want to use the photos for that you are hiring them to take. Is it just your social media? Is it your website? Is it something that you're going to be printing and handing out to businesses? Is it a billboard? You know,
right.
Who knows? Get really clear about that and then share that information with your photographer so they know what you want to use the photos for. That way there's no surprises. You're both on the same page. Many photographers, they will give you the rights to the photos so that you can use them whenever you want, wherever you want. You don't have to have their watermark on them, you know, so the photos can really highlight and feature your business. But the photographer, they will also retain ownership of the photo, as Erin already discussed, because they also want to use them for their own website and promotional purposes, you know, to show future business and branding clients what they've done in the past. So that's just something to know. I personally would recommend purchasing digital files with the printing and publishing rights, just so that you do have access to those at any time that, again, you can go back and use over and over again. So
yeah, but that goes back to, again, you know, just having conversations. If you choose to bring somebody in, is just to say, hey, what am I getting with this package? Am I going to get the digital files? Is that a separate charge? You know, am I getting the, you know, what do I get? And just have those conversations with the photographer so that, I mean, they're going to know, right? I mean, if this is something that they do professionally, right, they're going to know. That's a conversation they've already had and they've already thought about these things. But
and that will be like in a contract and all that kind of stuff. So
100%.
Conversations are important, but having the conversations memorialized in writing is even more important, especially if you want to be the one that owns the rights to the photography and then give. So a lot of times what I do, because I'm the lawyer, and I mean, I'll say I own the rights to photography and I'll give you the photographer a portfolio license back. That's sometimes an option. That's part of the negotiation, part of the discussion, what's going to be. But if that's going to be, I have to have it in writing that I'm the owner, because the default is that they are. And so it has to be in writing by law that if I'm going to be the owner. So it's important to not just have these conversations, but to have it memorialized in writing. So that way later on, when you're trying to remember what you agreed on, it's not like, well, remember we had that discussion on Zoom, or was it Google? You're like, no, just.
Well, and I think that's fairly standard for most photographers too, to have some sort of a contract, even if it's pretty basic, right? But it's a good thing to ask for if they're not offering it.
And the sooner you ask them, and don't be surprised, what? I have to sign a contract for this? Yes.
Right.
Is there a benefit for you being the owner? I'm sure people are wondering, like you, Erin, versus the photographer.
So in my world, yes, because then I get to decide what happens to it. Mm-hmm. And then when I do give the portfolio license back, I can be specific about what that goes back, or I can say, you know what, I don't want to have a portfolio license back for this. Maybe I'm doing something, I have something that I'm like, no, I don't want people to see that you've done this. So for example, if it's marketing stuff, usually it doesn't matter. If I'm having you come take photography for something that's not marketing related.
Sure, like something personal.
Something personal, something for internal purposes.
Sure.
Only. I may not want those outside of my company.
Right, of course.
And so making sure that I own it and that I didn't give anyone a license to do it outside of that particular purpose can matter. 90% of the time probably doesn't matter.
Yeah, but those are good conversations to have, you know.
But I'm the person who negotiated our wedding photographer's contract. So that's and I think,
you know, look, those are good conversations to have, because as somebody said earlier, I don't remember who, photographers aren't mind readers, right? So if you don't tell them, hey, this is for internal use only, that, you know, and it's not part of the contract, how are they going to know that that's not something that they can use in their portfolio or that they can share, you know? So it's good to
a client who does videography.
Yeah.
And they have a big client that they're doing a lot of internal training videos. And that client really doesn't want those internal training videos to be out anything other than internal.
Right.
And so you can have things
100%.
like that where you just don't want to have it outside of very specific purposes. And so it's
absolutely
important to know that ahead of time. Yep. And like sure your photographer or your videographer knows that.
Yeah, Addie, were you gonna say something as well?
And one last shout out to the people in the audience in the nonprofit world. You know, you might have clients you serve, or, you know,
Absolutely.
photos that, you know, require releases. So again, having those upfront conversations of who can you legally share photos of, and, you know, who really shouldn't you share photos of, you know,
Right.
ethically also.
100%. Yeah, absolutely. I want to, you know, I want to make sure we have time for questions. So we're going to we have a couple more things we want to touch on before we get to questions. But I know, Steph, you had kind of had some thoughts when we were talking through this ahead of time about, you know, some good apps for your phone potentially that you could use that could really help. I would love for you to kind of share those. I'm sure people would love to hear about that too.
Yeah. Super quick is the app called Snapseed. It's a free app. It's the green leaf one there, and it's amazing. The thing I want to express to you all is, like, when you start using it, you're kind of your inner creative, whatever comes out. So maybe not post all those on your business page right away, because you're going to confuse your audience if you start posting, you know, HDR photos and you haven't done it before. But there's tons of tutorials online on how to use it, so I won't go through that today. But Snapseed is a really awesome editing app. It's similar to like a Photoshop type app. It's super powerful. And then the other thing I just want to touch on, both for commercial and personal, is to make sure you have your photos backed up on the cloud somewhere. I mean, the cloud's not perfect, but Google Photos is free, up to like 2 terabytes or something like that. So for most people, that's plenty of storage, and it frees up your phone. You know, like when you go to take a picture, it's like, oh, your storage is full. Google Photos, right. You can just pull those off Google Photos when you want and open up your phone storage.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, thank you for that. I know there's so many apps out there that can be used. And I think, as Steph said, makes a good point. You know, before you start sharing them on your social, you might want to, like, just sort of take a beat, sort of figure out what you like before you start sharing all the edits that you've done, and then all of a sudden you have a very chaotic looking feed, right? But it's great that there's so many wonderful resources out there like that, and you know, as she alluded to, great tutorials as well that most of some of those apps have. I know, you know, just in terms of, you know, what we can share on social, you know, we've talked about this fairly, you know, ad nauseum throughout this, but just a good thing to continue to sort of to put forth is that it really is your responsibility. Again, you being the social media manager, the business owner, the whomever you are that you're watching, the non-photographer of the group, it is your responsibility to really prep your audience. So if you're not doing a shoot, you know, where you know, you're having somebody come in and do photos, and everyone knows you're doing photos, right? If it's an event, or if it's, you know, anything that's not where someone might have a candid photo taken or be in a photo and they didn't know, or they didn't, you know, pose for it. It is your responsibility to prep your audience. Don't put that responsibility or that ownership on your photographer. I think that's a really important thing. There's so many ways that you can do that. We can, you know, signage. Certainly, you know, you can put that in your announcements on social as you're sharing about the event. There will be photos taken. You know, that doesn't mean that people have to have their photo taken, right? People can say, hey, I'm not comfortable with that. You can let your photographer know this person doesn't want their photo taken. Those are easy fixes, right? But it is your responsibility to do that communicating. And I just want to make that really clear. That's not something that needs to be on your photographer. So as we kind of wrap up here before we get to questions, and I'm watching the questions come in, there are a lot of really good ones. So I want to make sure we leave a few minutes for that. But I, you know, just in terms of closing thoughts on everything that we've covered, which again, we've done a lot, and these are sort of a lot of the high points. Any closing thoughts before we jump to questions from all of you?
I do. Sherry Schaff, who's the person who does a lot of our Facebook stuff and essentially is my boss because she controls everything I do, is her birthday today. And she said she was going to join us, but she forbade me from singing. So she actually saved you all.
That's good.
But I want to wish her a very, very happy birthday. And I promise I won't make everybody sing right now.
That's great.
Happy birthday, Sherry.
Happy birthday.
And I can jump in if you'd
like.
Yes,
please.
A couple of points. I think the overarching things we talked about today are major, like knowing your brand and your vision, and knowing what that is moving forward. We talked a lot about like photo intention. What is the intention that you want behind these photos that whether you're taking them or you're hiring someone. And then sort of the notion of these evergreen photos, right? Really stretching your budget to get the most bang for your buck out of the photos. Budget again. Budget was huge today. So have those conversations, itemize, prioritize.
Right.
Erin, thank you for talking so much about, yes, what you can and can't and really shouldn't post online. And then, then we also talked about sort of knowing those platforms, voices for those platforms, tones for those platforms, and then ratios for those platforms.
Yeah, sizing. Yeah, for sure. And I think too, again, all of this goes back to, if you have those conversations ahead of time. I mean, I think we've just like continued to hit like communication, planning. A lot of these issues will be solved. So you guys are awesome. I want to jump to some questions, and we've had quite a few. So please, I'm going to sort of ask the questions. I don't know who's asked them, but these are questions that have come in online, and feel free to jump in. This is a very specific example. Someone says, how are you able to confirm with a printer that these photos are your originals? This person says, I've personally had issues printing as they claimed I didn't own them when I did. And I'm guessing, but I would like for you all to speak to this. If you had a contract or something on hand to show that would be sufficient, but is there, anybody have any thoughts on that?
I mean, we can, like everyone that we have a contract with, we provide a print release. Okay. So if they do run into issues with that, they can just email, we give them a digital copy of that. They can just email that right to the printer or anyone there. I don't know if any of you will want to jump in as well.
Yeah, Mason's giving a thumbs up. Yep. Okay, so releases. Yeah.
Because if I'm representing printers, I'm telling them to check, right? I'm telling them to ask.
Sure, yeah.
People have it. So if having a print release or a contract or something that says, yes, I own it. Sometimes that's hard if you're the one who took the photo. So you just need to have something like, I warrant that I did this and I'm willing to take on any issues printer, if you get sued for doing this.
But I think correct me if I'm wrong, photographers, but a release is fairly standard, right? For most of the time, if you're doing a shoot, you're providing some sort of release that they would be able to provide if that happened, right? Okay, cool. Yeah. Next question. What are your thoughts on reposting photos on social and so that other people have taken and credited them? Is that allowed, or if there's a photo that someone else has put on their social and I want to share it on mine, if I credit them, is that enough? Do I need to do more? What are our thoughts on that?
So my thoughts depends on what you mean by repost.
Okay.
If you're thinking copy, paste, download, upload, no.
Okay.
Attribution is not the same as permission.
Okay. Yep.
And so if you're sharing, usually okay.
Yeah.
But if you're copy, pasting, uploading, downloading, no, unless there is something that says that's okay. Like if there's a Creative Commons license that says you can use this with attribution. Unless you're seeing something like that, no.
And I will say too, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I do believe we had this conversation. You had said, if you reach out to someone like via direct message and say, hey, I love this photo, can I share it? And they on my Instagram, and they say yes, that is a sufficient thumbs up, as long as you were clear what you're going to do with it, right?
So that's getting permission. It's getting written permission. Yep. Do it. But then if I say, can I use this on my Instagram? Then you get to use it on the Instagram. You do not get to use it on Facebook and Twitter and your website. You got permission for that one thing. So you can't just say, okay, I got permission, I can do it however I want. And it doesn't mean that you necessarily get to modify that.
Right, of course, yes. Good point. So good point.
right? So you got in trouble with that a little while ago.
Yeah, I see that the photographers are muted, but they're all going, no, don't do that. Yeah, no, if you're going to repost something, that should go without saying, but I'm glad you brought that up because we should say it. Do not change someone else's photo if you're going to repost it. Please don't. Yes. So, but it's a good point that Erin makes. You don't necessarily have to have like a contract in order to repost something. If you just DM somebody an account and say, hey, love this, would like to reshare this on my Instagram, and they say yes, that's good enough. But to Erin's point, if you want to share it elsewhere, you need to ask for that as well. So great question. And I think it's a thing that a lot of people are wondering. Another really good question here, with a very specific example. What about taking a picture that features something like the UW Memorial Union terrace chairs? This person says, years ago, I used an image from iStock with an image like that in a direct mail campaign, and we received a cease and desist. That's a very specific example. I'm assuming this person purchased the image from iStock, but it featured something else. So Erin, can you speak to that at all? Like why that might have happened or how you avoid those situations?
Sure. So this is where you start spreading, sneaking into trademark law over copyright law. Because by using something like the Memorial Union chair, it could imply an endorsement from the UW.
Gotcha. Yep.
So that cease and desist is more about trademark, and it looks like you're trying to take their goodwill and put it into yours. So you have to be very careful about doing that. There are things where you can take public photos and, like the Picasso sculpture in Chicago and things like that. But you have to be careful if you start taking iconic things that start implying some sort of relationship or endorsement. And
that makes a lot of sense.
Running into trademark rather than copyright law.
So in that case, yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense, maybe why that happened, but just a good thing to think about for the future. If you're looking for stock images, make sure that you sort of keep that in mind. Probably don't want to use this person's story as a cautionary tale, and don't let that happen to you. Because again,
photos, it's always important to read what you can and can't do. If your stock photo says you can use this on web, then that doesn't mean you can use it on mass mailing. Because mass mailing, they're going to charge you more.
Steph, I know, what were you going to say?
A lot of times with iStock photo type stuff, you can purchase like a personal or commercial license as well. And personal is obviously going to be super cheap. Commercial is going to be expensive. Yeah. So people are going to go for the, cheaper one, but then they might get in trouble. What I was just going to say is that's really when you want to take your own photos, and that goes back to intent and sticking out from the crowd and all that other stuff. When you start taking your own photos, it's better.
For sure. No, that's great. Thank you all. I think that's a really great, thank you also to the person who asked. It's a great story to share, to sort of use as a no-no for people so they don't get into that kind of trouble. Somebody's asking, photographers, you may or may not know this. I mean, is there a list or a database in Dane County or surrounding areas of event photographers that are not specifically just wedding only? And I will say, first of all, before they answer, there are 4 individuals representing 3 different businesses here who are amazing. So I will give them all a little shout out and a plug to say, if you're looking for help and need some photos, all of their information is in the event description for this event that you're watching. So please start there, because they're awesome and they're rock stars. But if for whatever reason you're like, oh, I don't like good photos and I want to find others, are there any, do you guys know of any like lists or databases or resources for finding other photographers? No?
I mean, you got to do your own research, I guess, online.
Sure, that's fair. Yeah.
I would add to that, though, when doing that research, there's different levels of photography. You have your beginners and your amateurs. So if you're looking for something like that on a budget, and then you have, people that are like us and the other 2, we are more, in portraits and weddings and commercial stuff. So I pay differently for that. But yeah, I don't think there's a list per se. Do you guys know?
I was gonna say Google, of course, is like a list. You know, like you could do Madison photographer, Madison portrait photographer, Madison commercial photographer. Or another idea was look around at businesses that you really admire their branding, or your other entrepreneur friends, people were local professional photos that you've seen, and reach out to that person and say, hey, who took the photos for your website? I really love them. 100%. Who took those headshots? Who did your Instagram product photos? And then they can also tell you not only here's who did it, but was it a good experience or not?
Yes. Because I think, and that's actually a really great point you make, Mason. Experience. Yeah, we didn't really, obviously we were kind of touching on the logistics, but if you're trying to find somebody, and you see somebody, a photo out there that you like, and you're reaching, ask if they had a good experience, because that's huge for sure. So good tips, guys. Let's see. Does anybody have any suggestions on classes to take for photography for amateurs? I would love to learn more beyond this hour. Anybody? Steph?
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of on the fence whether to unmute or not. I mean, I do teach phone photography classes, so that's definitely something that I could help out with. And then, like right now, online is really a great way. I don't know if either of the other photographers teach camera photography classes, but the camera company in Madison does stuff, and then also just amazing classes available right now through Zoom and YouTube.
Yeah, I mean, YouTube is a great resource. I mean, the problem with that is you never know you don't always know the credentials of the person who's giving said instruction, but
actually, and then creativelive.com. Creativelive.com is like, there's your credentials. They do a really awesome job.
Okay.
So check that out.
Yeah, and the camera company, I mean, it's good to know that it's always nice to support local, so it's good to know that they do some educational stuff as well. So thank you. Let's see, are there, I'm not sure the intent behind this question, but I'll just put it out there, and then I don't know, but are there template contracts available for photography services? I'm wondering if this person is just kind of curious what like a sample contract would look like. But again, I'm guessing you could probably just Google that and find some sample contracts out there to know.
For sure, there's sample ones out there. Take a look at them, but I always get concerned about people wanting to use template ones because you want to make sure they fit your actual. Right. And so it's important to understand, but certainly if you Google, there's going to be hundreds of them that you can look at, and make sure you understand each provision, because you don't want to accidentally have it say the wrong thing because you're not thinking, or say like all of a sudden it's saying that you're using California law. Right. Well, that's something that's happened. So Google, Mason? Bing, whatever search engine of choice is, you'll find a bazillion.
Yeah, and I'm just going to chime in on this from like a photographer, just like human to human standpoint too. I think for sure, obviously, it's so important to have contracts for yourself. We also want to have a contract to protect ourselves too. That must be the foundation, and it's really important. But also remember, like, I'm a normal person. You're working with another human being who wants to serve you really well. They want you to have an awesome experience. They want you to walk away feeling really good so that you can refer them or you come back to them. And so just having those real life good, conversations ahead of time, clear expectations, things like that. Like, your photographers aren't out to get you. You know what I mean? Like, they want you to have a good experience, and it's going to be hopefully a good working relationship. So don't like freak out and worry so much about like, what's the exact wording? Like, if you trust them and again, Erin, I'm not saying like be naive, but just like find someone that you enjoy working with. And I think you'll most likely be fine in most situations. So
I also will say too, I want to do a few more questions, but we're gonna wrap up here soon. But I want to get to a couple more because we got a couple more good ones and we got a few more minutes left. But this one is for photographers. So for photography of spaces, so it seems like this person is asking specifically about like classrooms, offices, etc. How do you maximize the lighting? It says that we struggle with large windows and lots of natural light, making the photos sometimes appear super dark. Would you suggest a separate light source in these types of situations? Thoughts?
Well, we can jump in. Like we said in our presentation, that might be the time to hire a professional photographer, just because it's a really complicated process. It looks like, there are a lot of things you can do with your phone, but especially with lighting and, getting into that architectural photography space, there's a lot more of a complicated process where in post, we might be layering photos on top of each other to create that, exact lighting. So, you might want to analyze your budget. Is that the right time to hire a photographer?
Okay.
I'll say too, just back.
You can also block out lighting. Oh, sorry. You go.
No, you're good. You can keep going. Okay. Yeah, you go.
The joys of Zoom.
You can diffuse lighting in windows, but for big spaces, how Addie was saying, it might get a little bit more complicated. Sorry, Mason.
No, you're fine. I was just going to say, if you have to take the photo yourself and you're in a room, most likely you're not in a room that like all 4 walls are literally windows. So going back to the tip that I shared, you would want to be standing with your back to, let's say this is my one wall that doesn't have windows, and then all the windows are around me. So that light is coming on me this way. That's how you're going to get the best photo. Having the, facing the windows versus having the windows at your back. That should really help.
Right. Absolutely. This is an interesting question, although this must be coming from a photographer. This was one that came in from Eventbrite. As a photographer, is it cool or not cool to add your logo to images when you give them to clients to share?
That's a contract thing. I think we want to talk about that beforehand. If some photographers give out just low res images to use on Instagram and Facebook, and then they, high res, it might be more expensive, or they might not want you to have high res. They might want to print your photos out for them. So it's definitely a contract thing.
Okay.
So cool.
For sure. Right. And a lot of this, a lot of questions like that, I think too are subjective, certainly. And so that is why, again, it's good to go in knowing what you want and what you're willing to give on and what you're not willing to give on. And then you get that all in writing, right? So I think we're going to go ahead and wrap up. I think I got to most of the questions that came in on social. There were a few that we didn't have time for, but I just want to say, before we close down completely, just thank you to our panelists. Thank you to our sponsors. Thank you to everybody who just made this morning happen. I know there's a lot of information we wanted to talk about, and we really needed to kind of get it all down into a short amount of time, but hopefully this was helpful. Please feel free to share this because this video will live on our Facebook after the fact, so you can rewatch if you missed something or go back. Please keep commenting and asking questions. We'll try to get to those in other ways. And again, all of the information for all of the panelists is available if you need to reach out to them specifically in the description of this event, so you can actually get in touch with them directly. So thank you, all of you, for being here this morning. Thank you, Social Media Breakfast, for the opportunity to get to do this. And we will see you again next month. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.